All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I am currently inside of the Learning to Style HTML using CSS, and I'm in the Css Building Blocks, the second module of 4, and the section I'm in is Images, Media, and Form Elements. So as it says, that's what this lesson is about, how certain elements are treated in CSS, those being images, other media elements, and form elements. All right, images and video, as it says there, are described as replaced elements. CSS cannot affect the internal layout of these elements, only their position on the page and other things. But there are things that you can do with images, and we've seen a lot of them already. Certain elements, as it says, are also described as having an aspect ratio, which means that it has a size, both horizontal and vertical. And by default, it'll be displayed by that size. You've already seen this again with the images. Now, as mentioned right here, we've already talked about the fact that everything in CSS is inside of a box. If you place an image inside of a box, smaller or larger than the intrinsic dimensions of the image file, it will appear either smaller than the box or overflow the box. You just saw that in the example that I went through at the end of the last lesson. All right, so it says here we have two boxes, both 200 pixels in size. One contains an image smaller than the 200 pixels. It's smaller than the box and doesn't stretch it. The other is 200 pixels and it overflows the box. Okay. So what can we do about the overflow issues? A common technique is to set the max width of an image to 100%. As it says there, that will enable the image to become smaller in size than the box, but not larger than the size of the box. This technique works with other things like videos and iframes. So it says try adding, yeah. It says you can make other choices about images inside of containers. For example, you may want to change the size of an image so that it completely covers the box. And there's a property that's called object fit. As it says there, when you use object fit, the replaced element can be sized to fit a box in a variety of ways. Below, what they've done, as it says, is they've used cover, which sizes the image down and maintains the aspect ratio so it neatly fills the box. As the aspect ratio is maintained, some parts of the image will be cropped by the box. So when you look here, you can see that it's not that they're different images, but the stuff on the end here was cropped off to put it in. If you use contain as a value, the image is scaled down until it's small enough to fit inside of the box. It says this results in letterboxing if it is not the same ratio as the box is. There's also fill, which fills the box but does not maintain the aspect ratio. All right, and again, as always, the best way to learn these is to just sit there, create a very simple example, and start playing with it. When using various CSS layout techniques, it says you may find that they behave differently than other elements. For example, in a flex or grid, which we will talk about in a couple more lessons, it says they're stretched by default to fill the entire area. Images will not stretch, and instead will be aligned to the start of the grid area or the container. It says you can see this happening in the example below. We have 2 columns, 2 row grid container with 4 elements in it. All of the divs have a background color and stretch to fill, but as you can see, the image does not. It says if you're following these lessons in order, you may not have looked at layout yet. Just keep in mind that replaced elements, when they become part of a grid or flex, will have different default behaviors. We will hit on that again a little bit later. To force an image to stretch into the cell that it's in, you can do something like this. All right, where you're telling it to take up as much room as you want to. This would, however, stretch the image, so it's probably not what you want to do because that can skew the aspect ratio. All right, form elements. As mentioned there, form elements can be tricky to style when it comes to CSS. We're going to talk about form elements later on, just so you're aware of this. All right, it says many form elements are added to your page by way of the input element. And things like text boxes, all right, and there's other things too. There's specialized text boxes, there's type equal password, and type equal email, etc. And we'll hit on those in later lessons, okay? It says there are some additional elements such as text areas for multi-line text input, and there's also things like field sets and legends, so if we want to draw basically a box around our form. HTML also contains attributes that enable web developers to indicate which fields are required and even the type of content to be entered. So for instance, in here, if we click submit and these were required, we could have a message come on the side or below or whatever telling us that they were required. And we could also set it up for an email so that if it's a valid email, fine. So that would work. But if we come in there and do this, and let's just say that I put in here Jeff again, or I'd leave it blank, it would give us an error message. It says in the example below, they have styled some inputs using CSS. The borders, margins, and padding will work as expected. All right, it says try changing how this form looks by adjusting the border, adding background colors, etc. So again, we could come in here and, for example, for the button, you can see the background color. Maybe you just want it 000. You want it black. All right, and the color to be white. Okay, so we can come in and change any of these. We could change the border and make it bigger. Okay, we could change the padding and make that bigger. So you can see by making one change, it has a marked effect on everything else that's in here. All right, and this has got a thing for the submit button, and it's just changing the color, background color to 333. Well, what if we changed it to something like 111? Type equals submit, however, does not appear to like that. What if we don't change it at all? So you can see the effect that it has. All right. As mentioned right there, you should take care when changing the styling of form elements to make sure it is still obvious to the user they are form elements. See, you can even do things, for example, like you can take a hyperlink and make it look like a button. All right, and there may be reasons for doing that. We'll get into some of that stuff later. As explained in the lessons on form styling, which is much later, will be a much later presentation, many of the more complex input types are rendered by the operating system and are inaccessible to styling. Again, how do you find that out? You play with it. All right, so let's see. We're only at 8. We should be able to finish this because we've got inheritance, elements and box sizing, just a couple more things in here. Okay. In some browsers, form elements do not inherit styling by default. Therefore, you might want to make sure that your form fields use the font defined on the body or the parent. All right. That would tell it to inherit from the parent. Okay. Just to force that into happening. Across browsers, form elements use different box sizing rules for different types of widgets or different form elements. We talked about the box sizing border box before. For consistency, it says it's a good idea to set margins and padding to 0 for all of these elements that you're going to use, and then add those back in by using the border box. Not sure exactly why they decided to mention this here. I think this would have been better served in the section on forms, and I think we're going to go and hit on a lot of it again at that time. So it says you should also set overflow to auto on text areas to stop IE from showing a scroll bar when there is no need for a scroll bar. Okay, so this is kind of interesting here. It says putting it all together into a reset. This is a form reset. So what is it saying? That if your form has any buttons, any input elements, any select elements, any text area elements, whatever font the parent has, they should inherit that font. All right. And it should be at 100%. They should use the box sizing, border box, and we should turn off any margins or padding. And again, for this little hack for IE, overflow auto. Normalizing style sheets are used by many developers to set up baseline styles. Yeah, there is a normalize.css, and if we open that, you're going to see it right here. And it says to download it. We can download it, but there it is. There's the file. I've used that before, and another one that I have used quite a bit. You may or may not care, but I'm just going to come in here and type in Eric Myers CSS reset. And that's right here. There it is. They're almost the same thing, or at least they're very similar, but they turn off. You'll notice this basically says for virtually any elements that we have in here, turn off the margin, turn off the padding, turn off the border, inherit from the parent, etc. So what in English, what this is saying is, all right, that when you first start out, you want to remove anything that has been set up by the browser itself. All right, and that's pretty much what it's doing. If you decide to use this one from Eric Myers, or you decide to use this normalized one that we just looked at, that must come before your own CSS file and not after it. All right, otherwise you're going to be turning off probably most, if not all, of the stuff you've set. All right, it says for further information, look at these two articles. We're going to get into form styling later. All right, there is an images and form elements test in here if you want to look at it. When we come back in just a couple minutes, we're going to talk about styling tables. Number 10 of 12 lessons in here.